And I listened to that over and over again. I just thought, that just sounds so simple. Why aren't we doing this? And when I finally got together with my wife, Sarah, she's like, it's about time. We, like everyone, had the latest iPhones, even at the time. And we got rid of cell phones, which was about a $200 to $300 a month bill. We lived without cell phones for 3 years. It wasn't until 2013 when my wife got breast cancer that it was her and her dad. Her dad's like, yeah, I don't think she, when she's going to be going to surgery, she should really have a means of communication with her. And, they say behind every good man is a even better woman. And that is so the truth with us. I mean, it renewed my faith. We grew in faith, been through many trials together, from cancer and the whole situation with debt and lack of responsibility. And
you're listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast, where you'll hear the stories and interviews of everyday millionaires. We'll unveil their decisions, their strategies, and their current portfolio allocation. Now to your hosts, Clark Sheffield and Jace Mattinson.
Welcome back to another episode of the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. This is episode number 272. Big week here. This will be the final meeting of the Fed this week, which we're expecting probably another rate hike. Will be the final rate hike of the year. Obviously, they're trying to come in with a soft landing without triggering a recession to stop inflation. So be interesting to see how that kind of starts to play into what does the outlook look for 2023. It's been quite a economic roller coaster the last couple of years, ever really since COVID hit. But nonetheless, one that's for those that are interested in economics and finance and stuff, it's been one to really study and kind of understand how monetary policy works and investments and all sorts of things. So really looking forward to that and seeing what 2023 holds. Got the last couple of weeks of the year here. So wanted to get a review on YouTube. This is from Max. He said he would love to hear from more blue-collar millionaires like construction workers, firefighters, police officers, city bus operators. More of that is uplifting. So as always, we try to get a broad range of guests, and hopefully we'll get some more blue-collar ones. There's definitely several out there. Also got another review on iTunes. This comes from Mojo Mac. He says, reliable and relatable information. These guys provide a great forum for millionaires of all backgrounds to share great information and insights. As always, we appreciate those reviews. They help us continue to grow the show and get new millionaire interviewees. So without that, kind of takes care of the housekeeping for this week. This week we have David. He's a music store owner and has a net worth of $2.8 million, $270,000. That's in cash, about $20K in investments, about a paid for $520,000 house, $70,000 in a rental, $230,000 in retirement, and he values his business at about $1.6 million. He grew up in a very low to middle class home, never learned how to handle money, and thought if he could afford the payments, he could buy it. So it's going to be a great episode with David. He actually worked kind of in the field for a while before he kind of landed an opportunity to buy this music store and has continued to grow it. So great interview with David. Last week we had Paul, lived in the Northeast. He was about 40 years old, net worth of $1.4 million, about $825,000 of that was in a 401k. He had about $200,000 in a brokerage, another $180,000 in a Roth, another $8K in HSA, and $5K in crypto, with about $100K in home equity and $75,000 in cash. So without any further delay, let's get into the episode with David. David, do you want to just give us a little about your background and what you're up to now?
Well, I've been in the music industry as far as instrument sales and retail for about 35 years. Bought a store about 6 years ago.
Awesome. And what is your net worth today?
Just recalculated for a personal financial statement with our bank, and it was at $2.87,930.
Holy crap. So you tell me you own a store that does musical instruments and you're worth $2.8 million.
Yes.
That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable, man. Congrats to you. That's awesome. So
thank you.
Give us the breakdown. How is that 2.8 allocated?
Well, we are debt free. I've got, 268,000 and change in cash, 20,000 in investments, just side investments. 517,000 is our primary residence. And then we own a rental that's 66,000. Retirement accounts presently are at 229.57. And I value the business at 1.6, which is about 3 times revenue.
You said 3 times revenue?
Yes.
And is that about the valuation that you paid for it?
No, I actually paid much less. Fortunately, I came to work in the business in 2010, and the previous owner who started the business in 1982 was looking for an exit strategy, and we found each other. I came to work with him, kind of an informal partnership, and when he decided he was ready to retire, I purchased the business. I think it was around $385 that I purchased it, and we had agreed on a purchase price at the time of my coming to the store in 2010. And I did not. I grew the revenue quite a bit in those first 6 years, but I think it was year 6 and 7 after taking it over that I actually doubled the revenue. And it's been there the past 6 years.
Oh, that's awesome. So, David, when you're running a small business, you definitely look at things a little bit differently related to your personal financial situation. But I'm curious how you look at investing outside of the business versus inside of the business. How much do you put back into it to continue to grow it versus, putting some on the sidelines into other asset classes?
A lot of people will say you invest in what you know, and I definitely do that in some of the vintage and antique instruments that I will buy into, hoping to make a good return on those. We do a lot of our retirement account is actually in my wife's 401k, and we max that out every year. And because of the amount of income we make every year, I'm unable to do a retirement account. So I just started, just a normal investment account broken over the what Dave Ramsey would say are the 4 recommended mutual fund allocations. And my plan is, and I've been able to, I'm putting about 5,000 to 8,000 a month into that. So about 100,000 a year. Between 50 and 100,000 is what I want to put away. So in 10 years, I'm caught up to where I should be. Before, I should backtrack. Until 10 years ago in 2010, when I came to be a part of this store with the idea of being a future owner, I actually had a negative net worth. Lived through stuff, I guess you could say. I every penny that came in, we put out. Had 2 houses prior to the one that we own today. Actually 3, but I'll backtrack. Our first house, after I got remarried, was a gift more or less from my parents, in that they just let us buy it for what they owed as they were moving into a retirement community. So we promptly took out an equity loan and did some updates. And then in my line of work, if I'm changing jobs, I have to move to another city. It's not like the specialized music niche is on every street corner. And 3 years after buying this house, I got a new job. So we were up and moving. We had to sell that house at a loss. I think we paid $10,000 for somebody to buy our house. And then this was in 2007. And shortly after moving to Atlanta, we bought into another house at about 2008. And if you're aware of that time period, there was a housing bubble that was just beginning to show itself. And from the time we purchased our house for 185 in Atlanta, when it came time for us to move to our present location in 2010 to take this opportunity, our house was worth 124. So we were at a loss there too. I can't remember what we ended up paying. And at the time, I mean, we had 2 car loans. I had 2 motorcycle loans. We had the house loan. And when we moved, I sold most of what I could. Still moving to where we are now, with a negative net worth in 2010. And I would say a year later, we bought our previous house here. And we finally learned to do it right. We held on to that house for about 10 years and actually made $10,000 over what we paid for it. And we had already had it paid off by then as well. So that was helpful.
So, David, let me just ask you here, just because you dropped so much nuggets there, I just want to follow up with you on a couple things. So you mentioned like you've been through some things and maybe you had a rough start on the finances. How did it all come together? Was it a conversation? Was it something you learned talking to somebody? Where did you start becoming more intentional about all this?
Well, growing up, I grew up in a middle to low middle class home. My parents are both deceased. Neither of them left. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. Neither of them left us any money. I never learned how to handle money. I thought as long as I could afford payments, I was okay. And through this time, my wife and I, I've been a Christian since I was 14, 15. Before our move from Atlanta, we had been going to a church and heard of this Dave Ramsey guy. I narrowly missed being involved in a financial peace university there. I think I told my wife wanted to go to this class, and I think I told her something like, we shouldn't store up our treasures. Our money's meant to be spent. Obviously, misquoting the Bible. And after moving, there was a period. I moved here in April 1st, which is, I find funny, was my first day on the job. And my wife and our youngest did not move here until July. And in that span, I came across the Total Money Makeover in an audiobook. And I listened to that over and over again. I just thought, that just sounds so simple. Why aren't we doing this? And when I finally got together with my wife, Sarah, she's like, it's about time. Like I was, come on, really give me some credit.
How old were you at this time?
So that was 2010. I would have been 39. I'm born 39, in 71.
And your net worth was what?
Negative, totally. I could not. I was the stereotypical, could not get $1,000 together if my life depended on it. I had no money in the bank, no emergency fund, anything like that.
This was 12 years ago, give or take.
And my wife still had some student loan debt from college, and so that was our first plan of attack, was to get out of debt. We like everyone had the latest iPhones even at the time, and we got rid of cell phones, which was about a $200 to $300 a month bill. We lived without cell phones for 3 years. It wasn't until 2013 when my wife got breast cancer that it was her and her dad. Her dad's like, yeah, I don't think she, when she's going to be going to surgery, she should really have a means of communication with her. Granted, where we are, everything's within 5 minutes. So at the time, she ended up getting a cell phone in 2013 when she was diagnosed with breast cancer and going through the treatment so we could communicate. But even, it only took us like a year and a half to get out of debt. But even after that, we were focused and intense on getting the house paid off and staying out of debt that we didn't even bother getting cell phones after, even if we could. It just wasn't a thing. Lived on with the landline.
So besides the debt, or besides the home, excuse me, besides the primary mortgage, what other debt and how much did you have?
Well, at the time, I would say it was probably between 40 and 50,000 with student loans and some minor credit card debt, and had a car loan that we had to finish. And we ended up selling the motorcycles and a few other things.
And how did you? Let me just jump to the business here. How did you buy the business? Did you get an SBA loan?
So in the meantime, from 2010 till when I purchased it at the end of 2015, by that time we were debt free, just about had our house paid off, and had gotten our credit back to a point where half of the business was a personal loan through a bank, obviously secured, and then the other half was a carryback from the previous owner. Half with the bank was a 5-year note with a 30-year amortization. And by that point, I had become so debt averse that I had gotten them both paid off within the first 3 years of owning the business. Like I said, I pretty much doubled the revenue from that first year on, and profit was in close to 250 a year. So
how did you do it? Like, how did you do that, David? How did you grow it so quickly and so successfully?
God, I give God the credit. Because I'm not an educated business person. I've always had, I've got stories I could tell you from my childhood that I've had an entrepreneurial bent, and I've always bought and sold items. My wife's, from the time that we were first together, I would have a revolving door of guitars. I play guitar, and she was, when I'm spending $2,000 or $3,000 on a guitar, and we barely have, pennies to rub together, she came to understand that it was going to be okay, because I would end up either getting bored with that one or finding something else to replace it and then selling it and making money. There were times even in the 90s at the my eBay account goes back to the beginning of eBay, and I was buying and selling guitars and things on eBay too. Even had a knack for, seeing something that other people didn't see in their eBay ads, knowing what they had and able to buy it on eBay and then sell it on eBay almost immediately and make money. So I had an idea. I constantly read. I like Jeffrey Fox. I think that's his name. He has a lot of these little, you see him in airports a lot. A lot of these pretty quick 2-3 hour read business books. And I would have to say it was having a lot of faith for sure, but doing all this study, customer service, treating people the way I want to be treated in the business, how I would want to be treated in a similar situation. And it's all become word of mouth. I had a lot of knowledge from my past. I worked at several different businesses over the years that I picked up and learned things from other owners that when it came my turn, I used a lot of that information and knowledge to change a few things and actually move the business into more of an upscale type retail than just your student level.
Yeah. So before you bought this business and started growing it, it sounds like you were working at different music stores, kind of just jumping around before you decided to do it for yourself.
Yeah. Well, there was a point. I've worked for probably 3 or 4, and it's always been the smaller boutique type places. And the last one before the current business that I own, it got to a point where I didn't know if this is what I wanted to be doing, because I just didn't have that love for the job any longer. My wife has always said she thought I was weird because I was always the guy that on Friday I look forward to Monday, ready to go back to work instead of living for the weekend. because I just love what I did. And it was getting to the point that I was getting burnt out and frustrated, that I even was looking at going back to school to find a different career path. But she convinced me before wasting all that money to take the Berkman, which isn't cheap. I mean, that's a $400 or $500 at the time test, kind of like the Myers-Briggs, but it also got you a consultation with an advisor. And it turned out that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, but I should be doing it for myself. I don't have the temperament to work for somebody else, which led to me putting out feelers and finding my current situation. Found the owner who had this business since 1982 and was getting up there in age that he wanted to find an exit strategy, and turned out I was it.
That's awesome. So, David, where do you go from here? Do you have a target net worth down the road? I mean, at some point, do you want to sell this business to somebody else as well?
Yes, I would like to see it continue. Next, our 40th year in the same location too, which is awesome. Things, even through COVID, where a lot of people had some downturn in issues, we only lost 8% over 2020, and we're already well above year to date for last year. So I don't see growth being stunted in any way, unless there's a major economic downturn. But I'm hopeful. There's always a service industry, whether people are buying items or not. The service portion of our industry is going to remain, and when you treat customers right, they tell other people and they come back, and we again gain new customers from word of mouth. My ideal would to see this business continue even beyond me. I've actually started looking for my exit strategy now rather than waiting another 10 or 15 years. It would be good to have it in place sooner than later and have that person growing with me and know that I actually can leave it to the right person. I think both the previous owner and myself are fortunate in that we found each other. But my goal, like I said before, I'm trying to catch up on my investments in retirement, that $50,000 to $100,000 a year for the next 10 years. Will be in the position that I would think with my wife's current 401k and maxing that out, will be at the 2 million mark in investments to be able to draw that living income off that. And that's where I would like. I mean, that's where we want to comfortably be is have that 2 million mark to in liquid, not liquid cash, but invested cash that we're drawing the interest.
Do your friends know that you're wealthy?
Some do, some don't.
What about family?
I think they know. I haven't explicitly said anything. We don't. That's not us. We don't really flaunt it. But I think most people, if not all, know we're debt free. That I did. We've told people about that, and we try to tell people about Dave Ramsey and his financial peace plan as much as possible. We actually lead the class. I've done it a handful of times, and we do financial counseling through our church. Anybody that is having issues with debt, but I mean, I don't think I've told anybody. Other
Good
than
for you, though.
kids.
That's impressive.
Our kids know.
Hey, let me just jump back to the business real quick. You said that the guy that owns it was kind of ready to sell it, but how did you find it? Is it somebody you knew and had networked through, or did you find this online?
All of the above. It's a niche business. It's a subset of music stores that it's a very small community. And I actually found an ad that kind of a blog post that the previous owner put out there. And that blog post was actually 2 years old when I contacted him. And it just turned out that he had not found somebody in that whole time, which again, I would say is God's providence for sure. We've had many God moments in our lives, and that was definitely one of them, because it just turned out to be the perfect situation for both of us.
Yeah.
And,
well, good.
And that's
good
how we
you,
connected. Yeah. And it's funny that there was a point where I was doing work in St. Louis that I did subcontracting work too. And after taking over the business, cleaning out some files like a year later, I found one of my resumes and price sheets from that I sent out to cold call. And I didn't even realize that I sent him one. And this was probably from 10 years earlier.
Wow. Hey, let me jump to a different topic here. Something that you filled out in the form before. A big thing that had an impact on you, or some advice you give, is the importance of choosing the right spouse. So just curious to get your take there.
When I was young, very young, early 20s, 22-ish, I met my oldest children's mother, and was not in a good position in life and a good frame of mind, and we ended up going about things the wrong way, that she got pregnant, and doing what I thought was the honorable thing. We got married, had a second child 3-4 years later. In hindsight, I see that it was not a good situation from the beginning. The relationship there, we just were not meant to be together. We did not mesh well at all. And I've always had some kind of drive and an aspiration in life. And I didn't see that in her. And I think it was weighing us down, weighing both of us and myself in particular. And we just kind of went separate ways. I think it was after 9/11, we decided I was still in this business then. And so we had moved from St. Louis to Atlanta the first time. And then 9/11 happened. And so we're young kids, 27, 28, somewhere in there. And, with two little kids, and both of our families are in St. Louis, we had no real support system. And we moved back to St. Louis just to get our kids near family and our parents. And that's when things started really showing themselves as what they were. And that's when it was after we moved that we separated. And whether that support system was for our kids or really for us separately, who's to tell? But we ended up separated and divorced. And 3 years later, I met my current wife, my last and only wife for now. For the rest of time, she is a very strong, driven woman. And, they say behind every good man is a even better woman. And that is so the truth with us. I mean, it renewed my faith. We grew in faith, been through many trials together, from cancer and the whole situation with debt and lack of responsibility. And she has always been a very strong encourager and support in my life. When I took the Berkman and he said, you need to do what you do, but do it for yourself. Her first thought was, well, how do we make this work? How do we start a store? Where do we do this? And what's it going to take to get it done? And that was, that seemed very intimidating and very daunting. I mean, that was on our horizon, was starting our own from scratch. But thank God we found the one that at that point had been around for 30 something years, 32 years or whatever.
Yeah.
That had, and the previous owner didn't carry debt either. I mean, I wasn't taking on any debt load, which was great. it was us walking into a good situation and continuing it and growing that good situation into a better one. And in my wildest dreams, I would have never thought to have a $500,000 home paid for. It's just crazy.
And thank you, first of all, for sharing, David. Not obviously an easy thing to open up about. So you guys have no debt at all, right?
Correct.
Currently. Wow. So paid for house worth, you said 575, correct?
517 is the current.
517. Okay, sorry. So just in closing here, David, I mean, you're in small business, and we obviously like to highlight those in small business. We haven't had as many probably as we would have liked come on the show, talk about small business, because I think that is a nice chunk of people that have been financially successful. But I mean, just if someone were to come to you and say, hey, how did you do this? Or what are the benefits of being a small business owner and growing your net worth? Just kind of curious to get your final words here in closing in terms of how are you able to do this along the small business line, and maybe which mistakes to avoid going forward for somebody?
It's going to sound hypocritical because obviously I took out a loan of some kind to buy the business, but I knew going in I wasn't going to keep it. That being said, you don't know how that's going to end up going through the life of that loan. But I would strongly encourage to not take on debt. Don't overextend yourself. I know some people say, it's a gamble and you've got to risk, but there's other ways besides risking everything to make it work. I mean, you certainly have to put in the long hours and the drive and have the drive to do it. That would be my first. Just stay out of debt, grow it slowly. There are many chances that I've had to expand. I even looked at a second store, but I really took the time to count the cost and see where that was going to lead or what it was going to take away from the present situation. And because this would have been in another city, I didn't want to sacrifice my current clientele's level of service just to expand. So that never happened. I did end up buying over the last 6 years. I did have the opportunity to actually buy out 2 other stores, which I don't know if I mentioned that or if it was before we started when we were talking, that I do carry a $200,000 line of credit that I never use, but it's there I keep it just to have it in case I need to make an extremely large purchase, like buying out another store's inventory without strapping the business for cash. I just like at home, I have an emergency fund for our home, peace of mind here. I also have an emergency fund that I keep it in retained earnings for the business too, just in case it's lean. If absolutely nobody walked in the store for a year, I could still keep the doors open. God forbid that ever happens. Wow. But I just would not want that. The other, so you were asking about business. Besides staying out of debt, keep it on cash. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. I think that was kind of a good place to end. Good nuggets of advice. I mean, keep it in cash. You got 68.
Yeah, I had another point that I wanted to put in there, but
yeah, go ahead.
I don't remember.
I got off. All right, we'll end it there though, David. I mean, thanks for coming on. It's really fun to hear from somebody that's a small business owner, and obviously you've done it well and grown the business. So again, everybody, that's David, net worth of $2.8 million. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to the Millionaires Unveiled podcast with Clark Sheffield and Chase Mattinson. For more stories, investment opportunities, and information, check out our website at millionairesunveiled.com. See you next time when you'll hear from another everyday millionaire.